Yes, sir. Welcome back to Talking Nets, episode 85. Keith McPherson and Hudson Flynn joining you on Thursday. I don't know the day. I think it's March 4th. I do know the day. And we've got a special guest. You heard the intro. Joe and Evan. Evan and Joe. Just kidding. It's Carton and Roberts now. Evan Roberts from WFAN will be joining us. But first, we got to talk about the game last night. Hudson Flynn, say what's up to the people.
Man, what's up to the people? We had a treat last night. We saw James Harden going back home, going back to Houston, dealing with some boos with a tribute video, showing love to the people who weren't booing, seeing a lot of confused people wearing 13 jerseys. Saw a Kyrie jersey out there in the crowd. Some good stuff from that game, but man, I'm just excited for the interview. I mean, that's crazy. We got really the biggest Nets fan on, New York sports radio coming onto the podcast. So that's huge.
Yeah. And I mean, he's active on Twitter. He's probably the biggest Nets fan on Twitter. He's got 105,000 followers, and he was nice enough to follow us on Talking Nets. I DM'd him and he came on the show, and I think everybody's going to enjoy that. But what I'll say quickly about the Rockets game, the Rockets lost the trade. We all know that, but they lost 13 in a row. Hudson had a good joke saying that the Rockets lost 13 in a row to honor the former number 13 that was on their team, James Harden. We know they're going to retire his jersey, but man, I loved how Harden's demeanor was going back there. He wasn't emotional. He wasn't compromised. He wasn't anything but professional. And we are blessed to have Harden. I'm rocking the "We Go Hard, We Got Harden" YouTube. Y'all see that? If you're listening to this, go subscribe to the YouTube. What a game. It was just another game where the Nets figure out how to get it done. There were some turnovers, but you're getting to see guys like Nick Claxton come into their own. Bruce Brown, he's here. He got a new nickname last night. Downtown Brown. Downtown Bruce Brown hitting threes. And Joe Harris, solid. I think he was 4 for 5 from the three-point line, and the guys just get it done. Someone said Kyrie was off. I think in our Instagram comments, someone was like, Kyrie had an off night. He only shot 33%. No, if you watch that game, Kyrie did some ridiculous things in that game, whether he was dribbling on the ground, some of the moves he made, the step backs. It don't matter if he only shot 33%. That's why we have other guys on this team. Anything else from the game? Landry Shamet, got to shout him out. The role player that Landry Shamet has become, the 23-year-old guy. I appreciate the fire that he went through in the beginning and how he's performed after that DMP.
Bullying works.
Cyberbullying works. Go on the internet and say things about people. They will respond.
He actually did, though. I think that was funny. He did. He sent out a tweet and he said, it'll come. The shot will come. It's all in due time. And it came, and it was huge. I was just really glad to see that, obviously, but can we just take a couple moments? I don't want to take too much time before this interview to talk about how good Bruce Brown and Nick Claxton are. I know you mentioned them briefly, but Bruce Brown played arguably his best game as a net in that Rockets game, putting up not just points. He put up rebounds. He had a great assist night. He was on the offensive glass. He was like a plus 15, something ridiculous. And he was just playing great in all facets of the game. Obviously, he hit that 1-3, went 1 of 2 from 3. And then Nick Claxton, in his 20th career game, was one shy from his career high in points and set a career high in rebounds in just 16 minutes of play. And I'm starting to think that Sean Marks was playing 4-dimensional chess by holding him out for as long as he did, because if we would have seen Nick Claxton doing this at the beginning of the season, he'd be on the Rockets right now.
No, we knew when he didn't get traded, it's because they knew. And in the post game, Nash alluded to we know what we have in this young guy. And even Joe Harris said, you wouldn't believe that this guy is in his second year. Like, he belongs, he fits in. We've known about, what Nick could do. And it's awesome to see, it's awesome to see him, getting minutes where we don't have to give DeAndre Jordan 38 minutes. And DeAndre Jordan was back home last night in Houston, Lob City, reverse dunks, throwing it down. So all is well, even though we had guys like Victor Oladipo and John Wall put up over 30 points, didn't matter. It didn't matter. Like I said, there was some turnovers that kept them in the game. There were some lapses on defense that kept them in the game, but it's a win. We've won 11 out of our last 12, and we're going into the All-Star break feeling pretty confident. So next up, man, let's get right to it. Don't want to waste any more time. I know there might be some people that came in just for this interview. Good. Make sure you click subscribe and make sure you stay with us. without further ado, the New York sports legend, our voice, the Nets voice on New York sports radio, Mr. Evan Roberts. Yes, sir. We have a special guest right now today that I'm super pumped about. I went to school for radio and television. This guy has lived the dream all the way through radio and television. He's got the #1 show, I heard. I don't know. I don't check the ratings, but he's got the #1 show. I used to be in the car and listen to Joe and Evan, but now it's Carton and Roberts. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Evan Roberts on Talking Nets.
I am honored to be here. Thank you very much. We share so much in common, the pain and the joy of rooting for the basketball team in the NBA, the Brooklyn Nets. So thank you for having me.
I mean,
Absolutely.
way to start it. Not even saying the basketball team in New York, the basketball team in the NBA. Just before we got on the podcast, we were having that conversation. That's all that matters. Who's the best in the league?
Exactly. I don't care about winning New York. I care about winning the whole thing. So the league, the association.
Hudson, you want to fire off the first question or you want me to do that?
I'll let you take it, Keith. I already got clowned for being, not 10 minutes early to my own podcast.
Yeah, some inside baseball. Evan was actually in the Zoom before Hudson, but Hudson has class. I know what that was like. It's been a long time, but this kid takes 25 credits a semester. He's got to handle business.
Wait, hold on a second. Let's be fair. I was in the Zoom before you too. I'm Tom.
Yeah. That's what I like
Honestly,
to hear.
I got the email and it's like Evan Roberts is in the Zoom, and I was like, I sprinted
the only person who's ever done that out of all the people we've interviewed is Ian Eagle and you. It's an elite group.
Now
you and Ian.
That's the company I want to be in, the great Ian Eagle, because we take these invitations seriously. If you're taking time out of your day to want to talk to little old me or little old Ian, it's a priority.
Yes, that's great company to be in. Ian Eagle was our first guest, and now that I'm thinking about it, yeah, you two were both early and on time. Says a lot about, I don't know why you're so successful and your careers have gone the way they've gone. Now, what I like about you, Evan, is you are the voice of the Nets fans in New York sports radio. I, on this podcast, have told people, don't listen to New York sports radio, listen to us. I said, we've got one guy that you can listen to. We've got one guy that holds it down for us. So tell the people that listen to Talking Nets how you became a Nets fan, or when you became a Nets fan, and how it just has been in this last year, this new Nets world, and being on the radio with a Knicks fan and Carton and having to defend the entire Nets world.
Well, my fandom began because I grew up on Long Island. So I think that was always a natural question from my friends who are Knicks fans. Like, why would you root for the Nets? And it was a combination of two things. My dad was a season ticket holder for the New York Nets when they played on Long Island, though we did have a falling out with them when they sold Julius Erving. So he kind of was a fan and then stopped watching. It was a weird phenomenon. But growing up in the early 90s, the Knicks were, I admit, very good. They were the talk of the town. They were a championship contender every year. And my dad said, look, I can't get tickets to go to Madison Square Garden. Let's go to Brendan Byrne Arena, as it was called, and eventually the Continental Airlines Arena. But I think it was a bond that I had because I'm a Met fan. We're the little guy in town. I'm a Jets fan. We're the little guy in town. And so it just became like this natural, it doesn't fit me to root for the Knicks. It doesn't fit me to root for the team everyone talks about and was very successful. And so I started going to Nets games and just fell in love with the guys, whether it was Drazen Petrovic or Kenny Anderson or Derek Coleman or Armin Gilliam. And so I became just a New Jersey Nets fan and watched them and watched every game and just fell in love and watched them grow. And now that's why we live in a world now that is not something I'm used to. It's not something you're used to. It's not something any of us are used to. Anyone that goes back to the days of New Jersey remembers a team and a franchise that we love, but could never have imagined. And I'm not taking the Jason Kidd era and throwing it away. The Jason Kidd era was great. We went to back-to-back finals, but it wasn't the star power, the attraction that this team has become. So it's a different world. I still pinch myself every night when I go home and watch this team play. But that's how it started. It was like this affinity for the little guy,
A New Yorker who actually became a fan of the Nets, stayed through the New Jersey years. They come back to Brooklyn, and he gets to bask in the glory of the Big Three. I love it.
Let me tell you something, because I want you to realize this as a New Yorker. So when the Nets moved to Brooklyn the very first year, I was at Madison Square Garden for a Nets-Knicks game. And these guys started taunting me by chanting New Jersey, New Jersey. And I said to them very calmly, I said, do you think that's a taunt? I'm proud of New Jersey. Like, the Jets play in New Jersey. So do the Giants. I understand that's not their team name. New York and New Jersey, we are brothers. We are sisters. We are essentially the same, even though they don't let you pump your own gas in New Jersey, which I do have a slight problem with. So it was never a taunt. I'm proud of our New Jersey heritage, and I'm really happy that the Nets have embraced it, especially with the retro jerseys that they have, because I love New Jersey. I think back to those days. I would love for one game to be played at the Continental Airlines Arena. How awesome would that be?
The Izod Center. The last time I was in the Izod Center, I saw Duke play Temple in like 2014. But before Hudson asked his question, one, pumping your gas. Nobody wants to pump their gas. It's super convenient. I love that. I grew up on it. Hey, here's a $20 bill, $20 regular. Somebody does it for you.
And it's weird. It's, it's just weird.
What? Why do you want? It's freezing outside. You want to get out of the car in the freezing cold and pump your gas?
Yeah, because I like to have my options. I don't want to sit there in my car waiting for somebody else. I want to get out of my car. I want to pump it myself. I want to take it out. I like control, which is kind of weird, but I do. So look, I love New Jersey. We're just going to have to agree to disagree. I try to avoid getting my gas in New Jersey because I like to pump it in New York, even though it tends to be more expensive, which
and it's cheaper over here. It's cheaper over here. And the last thing you said that your dad kind of fell, out of love with the team when, the things went down with Julius Erving. I had a similar experience when they moved the team from New Jersey to Brooklyn. I boycotted. I didn't watch a Nets game. I watched a little bit, but I didn't keep up with the Nets the first year they were in Brooklyn, 2012. And then I came and saw the Nets play. I think it was game 5 of the series against the Bulls in the Barclays Center. And I was like, this is a way better experience than the Prudential Center, than the Izod Center, Continental Arena, or Continental Airlines Arena. I'm sold. I'm with you guys. I'm trading in my old New Jersey gear. I will take one of those black Brooklyn jerseys.
Well, I give you a little bit of credit. I mean, it's not like you boycotted for 10 years and came back. I understand how maybe at first it would feel like, hey, they left me. They moved. Yeah. But it's the same marketplace. That's why even from New Jersey to Long Island, from Long Island to New Jersey to Brooklyn, they were a New York-based tri-state area team. It's not like they moved to Seattle. You know what I mean? It's not like they moved to Kansas City. So, for me personally, because I remember back in the day when there was a rumor of where are they going to move. Like during the Jason Kidd era, it was down to staying in New Jersey. It was down to Long Island. I think Charles Wang was involved. I could be wrong about that. And then obviously Bruce Ratner that brought him to Brooklyn. And I remember as a fan being, it's a win-win-win. Like no matter where they end up, they're local, they're here. But I did know that New York City was best for the long-term success. So I was rooting for Brooklyn only because I figured, hey, if they're ever going to have the dream of attracting stars, it would have to be in New York City. It's just the way it is, but it's local. They never left. And to me, Long Island, New Jersey, Brooklyn, they were still going to be the Nets,
It's only because of this. It's because New Yorkers are so stuck in their minds on, oh, New Jersey is little brother, the armpit of America. No one wants to travel to Jersey. Like they can't go over a bridge or through a tunnel. Meanwhile, New York, the whole workforce in New York is people in New Jersey that do that every single day. They either go through a bridge or tunnel every single day to get to work. And we have no problem with it. We have no problem going to see the Nets in Brooklyn.
What's your favorite baseball team again? I forgot.
The New York Yankees. I live about 20 minutes from the stadium. I drive right over the bridge.
They play in New York. So they play in another borough. So Brooklyn, the Bronx, it's still all of us. You know what I mean? So yeah. Look, you came around, so I'm not going to kill you. I'm not going to get on you. You came around, but come on. They weren't moving to, Staten Island. No, I'm just kidding. They weren't moving to St. Louis.
I appreciate the Staten Island joke. Go ahead, Hudson.
No, I appreciate the Staten Island joke. Weren't you getting like the Italian rainbow cakes from Staten Island just the other day though? Putting yes. the Staten Island slander, on the podcast, but not on your Twitter timeline. Trying to keep all the guys from the garbage borough getting at us.
I think we should edit out that joke I just made. I have made peace with Staten Island. I didn't want to make any insulting jokes, so make believe I didn't say what I just said. I love Staten Island. It's a great place.
Wu-Tang.
We'll make sure we leave the Staten Island slander out just for you. But you were talking about how it's crazy that the Nets have this big three now, but I don't know. I feel like it's been a little bit of like some recompense you've had to make with your feelings about the James Harden trade, right? I mean, initially 100%. it wasn't your move. I want you to talk about that because just the other day you said you were eating crow on that. You were going back, happy that they traded for James Harden.
100%. Listen, I think we'd all agree because we're all diehard fans of the teams we root for. You'd rather be happy and wrong than correct and miserable, is what I like to say. There were two things, not to excuse myself, but I do want to explain myself at least. When you're on the radio and you get news like that, like if you were doing a podcast and it was live and all of a sudden you're told stunning news, shocking news, it's different than having that ability to sit down and digest it for a few hours. I've learned this just doing a radio show. Like sometimes there's a trade made at 8:00 at night. By the time I get on the air the next morning or next afternoon, I've digested it. I'm calm. I was emotional because, and I stand by what I was concerned about. Those concerns are still there, was the Boston trade. I mean, it scarred me and it scarred all of us for a very long time. I know it's not the same. I get it. This team's close to winning a championship, but it was horrific year after year after year watching all those picks go to Boston. The other thing was Jared Allen, which has turned out to be true. I mean, Jared Allen's developing right before our eyes. Look how good he's been in Cleveland. Look how good he would have been for this team. And I guess there was just this sense I had in the moment, which I've been dead wrong about, that we were good enough to win without making a deal like this. And I think the reality is, especially with Kevin Durant dealing with this hamstring issue, is that James Harden gave this team stability. And that was the thing that I'd mentioned, but it wasn't big enough in my head at the time, which is James Harden plays. Like James Harden plays 38 minutes a night. James Harden is a reliable superstar. I love KD. He's been great. Right now, he's not that reliable. I mean, he's coming off an Achilles injury. I know the COVID stuff, you can't say that that's something that's on him. That was kind of weird. But now the hamstring injury, James Harden gives them that stable superstar. And if they didn't make this trade, they would not have nearly the same record they have now. Like I literally watch this team and think to myself, wow, if Durant doesn't come back, we could still win the East. Like we would never have thought that if they didn't make this trade. So I think that's a part of why I've come around on it. But a lot of it was just the raw emotion of, losing your guys, Jared Allen, Karis LeVert, and then the fear of what those draft picks could turn into. But look, I got to be real. James Harden's been awesome since he's gotten here. Kyrie Irving is completely bought in. Their chemistry has been off the charts. And I thought they were going to have the biggest difficulty kind of developing that chemistry together. They've been off the charts. And so I'll eat that damn crow every single day. I don't care. I'd rather be wrong and happy than right and miserable.
Yeah, it's tough because you're reaching millions of people and you're on record saying one thing. And then when you go to, root for James Harden or the Nets, there's people that are going to be like, hey, well, you said you didn't like the trade. And hey, that's what happens. You're supposed to give a take and an honest opinion as a fan. I'll say us as fans, we were hurt because we both love Karis LeVert. We both love Jared Allen still. Like, I'm excited to see Karis get on the floor. I saw you tweet about, Karis's update. We're still watching and keeping an eye on what J.A., the Fro, what he does in Cleveland. But we had an episode actually on draft night, or it wasn't a draft preview. We literally titled it, "This is not a draft preview. We want James Harden," as soon as the rumbling started about Harden. And on that episode, we had Scoop B, your former co-host on Net Slam and Planet. I think I even clipped him on the radio back then when he was a kid. And we knew what the Harden trade meant. And this was in November. The deal didn't get done until January. Oh, look, it's Carton.
We allow Knicks fans.
No Knicks fans. Podcast. Don't say it. Don't keep the mask on. Keep the mask on. No Knicks.
Go New York. Go New York. Go.
Here we go. Cut it.
Celebrating their
cut the tape
for a week.
We got a lot of things we got to cut out of this podcast now. Shoot, we got Staten Island slander. We got
this all
Knicks
day.
Fans photo bombing. It's ridiculous.
Don't let Craig know I made a Staten Island joke. He should not have any knowledge of that situation.
But yeah, what was I saying? So we wanted Harden. We just know, right? When the Lakers made the deal for AD, they're going to go win the championship. When the Warriors made the deal for Kevin Durant, they're going to go win the championship. Oh my, I saw this on your Twitter as well. What do we call this character?
Here.
Yeah, the Nets are supposed to get Pop instead of Nash.
You go
Pop to
hard.
BK finally happened.
I go hard too.
Listen, you're stealing, Carton, you're stealing the show from Evan. We get enough of you on WFAN.
Us guys that go hard gotta stick together.
Have fun with MVP Julius Randle. Get out of here.
We'll give him back to you in a couple minutes. We'll give him back to you in a few minutes. But now I'm losing my train of thought. I have that. That's gonna pop up in my nightmares.
You were bragging that I knew we should have traded for James
Harden.
Harden.
So Hudson and I, we have the tape. We were saying you make this deal if you can make this deal. We literally made the shirts that say we go hard, we got hard, and they were ready to go as soon as it went down because we just know the NBA model. Even with the head coach, you get a first-year head coach like Steve Kerr, like Nick Nurse, they end up winning the championship. Steve Nash, first-year head coach, looking like he can win the championship. Now, we didn't know Harden was going to take over the team. We're like, this looks like Harden's team because KD has been out. And then I saw you tweet, you said, your wife made a point. Like, how does it feel to know that James Harden has made more of an impact than Kevin Durant? And I put out a video 2 Saturdays ago saying Nets fans have waited 500 plus days for KD to play as a Net. And like, we're being patient. We can wait till after All-Star break. We got Harden. We're good.
Yeah. No, and I totally understand where you're coming from. That's why, like, I understand. I appreciate the compliment of, I'm a voice of Net fans. But here's the thing. We're all going to disagree on things. Like, I'm not the voice of all Net fans because my opinion was different than your opinion. And you guys turned out to be right. I have no problem admitting that. So it's always this weird thing where I say, listen, I try to speak for a lot of hardcore Net fans, but I can't speak for everyone because I just got one opinion. And that opinion may be very different than you and others. But I totally understand where you're coming from about this is a stars league and you got to get stars. And then you'll worry about the other things later. I guess it was just this thought, which turned out to be really wrong, that, hey, we've got Kyrie and KD and we've got so much depth. We can win with this roster. The way it's turned out, because KD's missed time, because Kyrie will miss a game here and there, where would they be if they didn't trade for this third superstar? But he's been incredible. And it is odd to think about that we spent so much time waiting for Kevin Durant as really our savior in a way. And James Harden just walks right in and he's become the man. And look, he deserves a lot of credit because he has evolved his game and changed his game because he knew to win in Houston, he had to play a certain way. As much as it may have driven me nuts, you nuts, and everyone nuts, that's what he felt was the way to succeed in Houston. And they did have success. I mean, they didn't get to a finals, but they also had to go through the freaking Golden State Warriors all the time.
Yeah.
He has evolved his game into which he is now Jason Kidd with more offensive firepower. That's essentially what he is on a daily basis.
It's crazy to watch.
And he's made that depth better, right? Like, we were worried about the depth. Like, look at Bruce Brown. Look at Nick Claxton. He's only played 20 career games. He's putting up career highs every night, looking amazing playing next to James Harden. And that's like one of the things that we've gotten from Brooklyn James Harden that, NBA fans, everyone in Houston, they didn't get from that James Harden. This James Harden is a pass first point.
Yeah.
And that's why it's not a problem with, is he going to take the ball away from Kyrie? Is Kyrie going to, it's not. He's so willing to defer. It's just so amazing to watch. It's such a unique talent that I never really got to appreciate when he wasn't on my team.
Well, think about this. I think the total amount of games, I could be off by 1 or 2, that James Harden and Kyrie Irving have played, where they both have played, is about 18 or 19 games. In every single game but one, Kyrie's taken more field goal attempts than James Harden. And it's almost as if James Harden, and we remember early on, he was being very not aggressive, almost taking like 7-8 shots a game. And we all realize, okay, that's not sustainable. You need to be more aggressive. But he has allowed Kyrie Irving in a way to still take 20, 22 shots a game. Like literally every game, Kyrie's had more field goal attempts than James Harden, while James is still having this great impact on the team. And I think a small thing like that, because it kind of sounds small, I think it's really helped in getting Kyrie Irving to buy in to these two guys playing so well together.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, when he came, the first game that he played for the Nets, he had 14 assists, and he was he was making Reggie Perry look good. And not to knock Reggie Perry, but like Reggie Perry is now in with the Long Island Nets, and he's developing. He's in his rookie season with no training camp and was thrown into the fire. And James Harden, I just like we saw him as a scorer. We saw him as one of the greatest scorers ever with the Rockets. No, his basketball IQ is tremendous. He's a facilitator. He can make something out of nothing. He's got everything in his arsenal. And for Sean Marks, that's the next question I want to ask about, because you're a Nets fan through all these different eras. For Sean Marks to be able to pull off this trade, and then also everything else he's done, even with getting Bruce Brown for Musa and a second-round pick, like this guy's on his way to executive of the year. He might be the greatest executive in Nets history all time. And if he can actually go and win the finals, I think he's the savior. It's not KD. It's not Harden. This guy came in when we had nothing. When you reference the 2013 trade, which I hated as a fan, we even made shirts around that. This is not 2013. This is 7-11-13. But let's talk about Sean Marks for a minute. From your experience watching the Nets all these years, how did we get so lucky to find a guy like Marks?
It's incredible. I mean, look, I'm always going to be partial to Rod Thorne because he built the Jason Kidd era Nets. He traded Steph for Jason Kidd. He made that draft night trade, the rights to Eddie Griffin for Richard Jefferson and Jason Collins. And that was great. It led the Nets to back-to-back NBA finals. But you hit on it. He inherited the biggest mess maybe in the history of sports. I mean, could you have a bigger mess than saying, all right, your team stinks. You don't have any cap space. You don't have any young talent, really. And, oh, by the way, you got no draft picks for the next 4 years. And I remember when he took the job, we had him on, and I, basically said, look, you're going to get 3 years in which how the hell can I criticize you? What am I going to criticize you for? You got nothing. And I could never have imagined he was going to be able to pull off what he's pulled off. And let's remember how it started. Because, yes, signing KD, signing Kyrie, trading for James Harden, that's all the icing on the cake. But he somehow drafted, helped develop Karis LeVert. Same thing with Jarrett Allen. Those two guys were not lottery picks when the Nets didn't have any lottery picks. He found Spencer Dinwiddie. He found Joe Harris. And Kenny Atkinson, who deserves a lot of credit for their development, the trade for D'Angelo Russell. So in the midst of having no assets, no draft picks, I mean, the guy built a playoff roster. That's why 2019 was so special to, I think, a lot of us. Not that we thought they were going to win an NBA championship, not even that core was going to lead to an NBA championship, but how did they get there? How did they, with no lottery picks? I don't mean to put down the Knicks, but look, the Knicks are in the lottery every year. Eventually, you'd think you'd hit a couple of times and put together a nice young core. The Nets had no ability to do that. So the job Sean Marks did was outstanding. And then look, he's had to make uncomfortable decisions. And by that, I mean trading guys he developed for all those years. Saying to D'Angelo Russell, thanks for the time. Kyrie Irving's better. Sorry. It's a cold, hard reality. So the job Sean Marks has done, and yes, win an NBA title. That's what we're all here for as fans. We want to see your team win a championship. But the job he's done, considering what he inherited, is one of the most impressive executive jobs I've ever seen.
I mean, Keith, you said in Nets history, and obviously there's some attachments to certain other executives. I'm looking at just in sports history. It's hard for me to think of someone who, like you said, I've inherited a worse situation and turned it into a team that is the favorites to win the championship in their league. I can't think of the level of, Moneyball or whatever it is he's playing to be able to reach this pinnacle that the Nets are on right now without having even won the championship is ridiculous. And I don't know, I forget who wrote Moneyball, but he better get a book deal with Sean Marks soon.
Michael Lewis, I think.
Michael Lewis, the
yes.
economist. Yes. I know who he is.
It really is incredible because I think most times you would never be in a situation. And that's the other thing, not to rip Billy King and Mikhail Prokhorov, but why not? What team is ever really in a situation in which they've traded so many picks, they're so bad, and the team that has rights to swaps are so good? Like, that trade couldn't have worked out worse if you try. Like, usually when there's right to swaps and you traded first round picks, and hopefully in the case of this James Harden trade, a lot of those firsts are going to be late first, right? The swaps won't even come into play. So that Boston trade, and what made the Marks rebuild so incredible, is everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. And to get them out of it as quickly as he did too, because I remember saying to my wife, she was my girlfriend at the time, when we were at a Nets game, I said, I just want to warn you, this team will not be good for a decade. That was honestly like they're just not. Like the Mets, yeah, we may have some fun. This team will not be good. You know what it was? It was walking out of the Atlanta series. If you remember, they lost in 6 to the Atlanta Hawks, got blown out in game 6, but put up a pretty good fight.
Forced to game 6. I was at game 5 and we were walking out there chanting like, we game 6, we want the Hawks. Like
we were so naive, but
we didn't know.
We did not.
When they were getting killed that night, you knew it was over. You knew like, all right, this, Darren Williams stinks. Joe Johnson's getting older. This ain't going anywhere. And I really thought it would be a decade before I went into that building for a playoff game. The fact that they were back in the playoffs 3.5, 4 years later, that's insane. Like that really is insane. And that's why, obviously seal the deal, win a championship, but the job Sean Marks has done to even get us into this situation is truly remarkable.
I will take this chance to laugh at the Celtics though.
Always. Look at them. They're still talking about Kyrie. We said it on the last episode. Like, didn't we do you a huge favor? You've got some star players over there that could have been over here. Why are you still focused on us?
Yeah, well, they could use Kyrie Irving right now. Let's be honest. They all couldn't wait for him to go. We got Kemba Walker. Life is so good. Listen, as good of a job as Sean Marks has done with nothing, listen, the Celtics have a good roster. They have 2 really good young players. If they don't win an NBA championship or get to an NBA Finals in the next few years, what about the squandered opportunity of Danny Ainge?
Yeah, I mean, he's to blame, and he knows it. He blames himself.
He should.
My next question is not a question. This is going to be long-winded. So I was listening to WFAN one day, and I stopped listening because I got out of the car. I got to be in the car more to listen to the radio. I know there's the app. I like never go to the app, but either way, a friend of mine texted me, and he's like, yo, Carton and Roberts are talking about the MLB fan cave. Now, I think like a month or two ago, probably a little bit over a month, Nickelodeon did one of the NFL playoff games, and you guys were talking about maybe MLB should do something like that. And you spoke on the MLB fan cave. And the MLB fan cave was around in New York from 2014 to 2015. 2010 to 2014. And actually, I am a product of the MLB fan cave. In 2014, I was in the last class. I was the Yankee fan that represented the Yankees for that whole season and watched every single game in the cave. And when I came out of there, I ended up working at MTV and, Rock Nation and some other places doing social media. But I went to school for radio, and I've kind of been trying to just figure out how to do 2 things at once, right? Some people challenged me and they said, you've made a little bit of noise in the Yankee world. Can you also turn your Nets fandom into something? And I said, yeah. And, a lot of times people want to bracket you or put you into one lane or one mold and say what can't be done. And you're somebody that, you talk, like I said, Nets, Mets, Jets, Isles, and you even talk WWE. So I've been listening to your podcast, and I really like what you do with it because it's reactions. They're short. They're under an hour, and it could be about anything. And you've been doing it for a while. And I think that you were one of the first people that was on to something. And we have actually shifted our focus to like being able to react to like, I don't know, Harden trade or whatever goes on. And then also keeping the podcast under an hour. So if you could give us some advice on, I guess, the podcast world, and, you're already, you've been in the radio world forever, but if you could give advice to people starting a podcast or people like us that are trying to grow our podcast on like, what's important, what the best strategies are and the things that we should be looking to do.
You know what I think, like, everybody's going to be interested in different things. Everyone's going to like certain things. So the reason I came up with that concept is because I thought to myself, what do I want to hear? I'm a sports fan, right? You guys are sports fans. You're diehard fans. What would you want to hear? And I always thought after a wrestling event, just to use that as an example, I'd love to talk about it with other people. I'd love to hear what other people thought about the event as opposed to, maybe texting a friend and then going to sleep. So my advice is always this, because we're all big sports fans. Everybody watching is a diehard fan of something. What would you want to hear? I think is the best mentality, because if you want to hear something, I'm sure there are many other people that probably think the exact same thing, because it's not one size fits all, right? There are certain things that you're going to be into that maybe I'm not as into, and vice versa. So what I always thought about reacting instantly, and you guys have done a great job to that, is right after a game or a moment, good or bad, I want to hear what other people think. Like, what are they saying about that? What are they thinking about this? So I think for anyone out there, what do you like? what do you like to hear? What would you like to hear that you don't hear, right? Because we can't please everybody. Like when we're doing a radio show, I always say this, no matter what we're talking about, there's going to be hundreds of people who say, I don't care about that. I don't want to listen, right? You're never going to please everybody. So my advice to anyone who's doing a podcast, thinking about a podcast, is to think, what would I like to hear that I've never heard? And then go do it. Because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who would say, damn, man, that's great. I love listening to that because I never thought of that.
Awesome. I mean, agreed. And pretty much what we're already doing. Hudson, you got anything else for Evan?
Well, I mean, first off, I want to toe Keith's company line, which is don't start podcasts. There's already enough Nets podcasts. We're good. We got it. we got the Nets coverage on lock. It's okay. We got us. We got Evan. We got the glue guys. We're good. We got it. We got it. But the last thing that I'll say, because I know it's 1 to 1:30 was supposed to be our timeline. I don't want to keep him for too much longer. But we just finished the first half of the Nets season. Finished it on a great winning streak. 11-1 in our last 12 games, looking really, really good for this team. And, let's just assume that it's the team that we have now, including Kevin Durant, not, adding Spencer Dinwiddie or making any trades. This season, finals, do we win it? Evan Roberts, I want your take right now, and we're going to hold you to it.
Listen, you're not going to understand this, all right? Because you root for the New York Yankees. I have never seen any of my teams ever win a championship. I'm 37 years old. That's my age. So I really started remembering sports in the early 90s. 91, 92. That's when my brain starts to remember things, okay? I've seen nothing. I've seen the Nets get to 2 NBA finals, lose both of them. I've seen the Mets get to 2 World Series, one of which we do not talk about, lose both of them. I've seen the Jets lose a bunch of title games. I know it's not rational for me to say I can't see them winning an NBA championship because I don't know what that feels like. I have no idea what that experience would be like. With that said, they better win because this is a roster, this is a team more than any other team I've ever rooted for that has the talent to do it. And so, look, at bare minimum, they got to be in the NBA finals or else we are going to have a long off season. We're going to be tortured by Knicks fans, tortured by everybody. So look, it's very difficult for me to ever predict my team to win a championship. I've never had the guts to do it because, irrational or not, I can't picture it. But this team over the next 2 years, and hopefully longer, because hopefully these guys stay long term, they better freaking win because they're good enough to. They better freaking win. Make that t-shirt. They better freaking win.
One goal, man. One goal. We're playing for a championship. They said it before Harden was here. We have to win the finals. Ladies and gentlemen, Evan Roberts. Hopefully we run into you at the Barclays Center. We got to save up for a couple weeks to try and get in there. But we thank you for the time today. You've been great. And Hudson, you got anything else?
Tell Carton not to come on the podcast anymore.
Yeah. Tell him we'll be listening in to WFAN. He could do his thing there, but we didn't appreciate him butting in on your time. Just kidding. Just kidding.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Evan. Have a good one.
Thank you, man.
Yo, that was fun. Man, I'm just happy, man. When you get a guy like Evan Roberts, I said on there, like, I look up to this guy. I've heard his voice on New York radio for so long. He started as a kid in radio. He's still crushing it. He's our Nets guy. And just hearing his stories and being able to connect with them, he's in the I can't even talk. He's in the WFAN studio that you see on our Zoom. So now that's in our video. I don't know. I'm still a fan at heart, and having a guy come on our show like that, like, that's a big look for us, a big step for us. Did you enjoy that, Hudson?
That was fun. That was a good time. That was a good time. We even got a special cameo appearance from his co-host Craig Carton, popping in. We got with the Greg Popovich hair mask flow situation going on, trying to masquerade as a Nets fan. That was a fun time. It was just a fun interview. Cool to have him on the podcast. It's been nice because he was one of the first, I would say, major people in the Nets world and the sports world to really follow us on Twitter and start to, retweet and show love to some of the things we were doing. And, it was only inevitable that we would have him on the podcast at some point. And I'm glad we were able to have him on now. What a great way to end the first half of the season, right?
Yeah, and the first half pretty strong. I think that's a strong guess, and this is a strong episode. And this episode is for the Talking Nets fam, the Nets fans, the Nets world. So we got to play your voicemails. Only going to run 3 of them. Shout out to everyone that sent voicemails in. We just don't have that much time. Let's play this first one right now from our guy, Sarge. Jersey, what up?
Hey, Keith and Hudson, this is Sarge from Jersey. Just checking in. I want to get some early predictions. I know we're going into the playoffs, and I'm wondering what you guys are thinking about if people are seeing the Nets as an underdog or as a fluke year to make it to the NBA Finals. What are your thoughts on that? And then do you think we could keep this going into next year beyond this season? Thanks, guys. Love the podcast. Should be number 1 in iTunes. Brooklyn, we go hard.
What do you think, Hudson? You think this is a fluke? You think this is a flash in the pan? You think we don't really got it? You think it's all hype?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because James Harden might not win the MVP this year. He might come second in MVP voting. KD, he was first in MVP voting, then he wasn't playing. So like, I don't know, maybe. Yeah, of course, it's not a flash. What are we talking about? What are we doing? This is not a flash. This is not an apparition. This is 3 of the best players in the NBA going out and winning basketball games and hopefully winning a championship. And just like Evan said, they better win that championship, because when you put together a collection of players like this, that's just what they do. That's what they better do. If you're going to pay them all this money and bring them in to do all this, if they don't win a championship, that's an L. But I don't see this team taking many L's.
I put on my Instagram, the Nets keep winning without KD. This is a wild reality that we're living in if this is our world, Nets world. And I love it. As a Nets fan who never thought about building a Nets brand and a Nets podcast, for the Nets to be this good, for the Nets to have arguably 3 of the top 10 players in the NBA on this team, there is one goal and one mission. We did say that to Evan Roberts. Like, we are doing all of this. We made the trades. We went through the heartbreak of losing players. We suffered through the 2013 years. We suffered through the years of not having draft picks to get to this. And if we do come up short, it's going to be a huge disappointment, and we'll have to wear that. But we'll only have to wear that until next year, where we'll get to do it again and maybe have a different looking team. And I think that this is the start of a dynasty, but I'm completely biased. This is Talking Nets. Next voicemail.
It doesn't have to be on, but
It's on.
Just Harden, his style of play, man. I mean, I think we're bamboozled as basketball fans watching those highlights and him just, kind of looking selfish to be selfish. Not even sure if that's the right term, but this dude is a baller. I mean, just the way he passes, shoots, the opportunities he creates for other teammates, it's unbelievable. And, I was taken aback. I thought the trade was going to be terrible, but these guys know what they're doing. Claxton is coming up. It's unbelievable. His growth, he should probably get more minutes, but I'm excited, man. I think we just need one more big man. We're good to go. All right? Thanks.
You would think that this guy heard the Evan Roberts interview,
I know,
but
right? They're all talking about the things we just said, right?
That voicemail came in at 9:28 a.m.
I don't know. Maybe they got their time machine running. Who knows? But yeah, it's just like we talked about with Evan, right? Obviously, there were people had some emotional feelings about what happened with the James Harden trade, but it's pretty clear to everyone involved, to the Nets, to everybody in the NBA, that the Nets are obviously a better team with having James Harden on the team. But like, all of the things that we were worried about are being addressed. When it comes to the lack of depth, that lack of depth isn't showing because James Harden, his passing ability, makes this team so much better. He's really the kind of player that brings the bottom up on a basketball team. It's just a high floor type of acquisition. And that's what we're seeing from him. That's why we're seeing Nick Claxton play so well. Bruce Brown plays so well. Joe Harris play even better than he already was playing. It's everything that we expected and more. And, like he said, he's bringing this type of game that it's just amazing to watch. And sometimes you watch it, you just sit there, you're, befuddled, you're bamboozled. You're just like, how does he do the things that he do? How does he make the passes that he does? But he does because he's James Harden, and that's why we got him, and that's what Sean Marks is doing. And it's just going to keep going that way because that's who James Harden is. That's what he does.
He's been more than advertised. We're NBA fans, right? We watch the NBA. We've seen him in the Western Conference Finals. We've seen him these past 8 seasons with the Rockets. And, you know, like the caller said, I think we were bamboozled as fans. And I think that NBA Twitter and writers and social media kind of painted him out as an isolation guy, as a scorer, an elite scorer. But I think back to what he said in his press conferences in Houston, where he knew it wasn't going to work and he wanted out. He looked at the team, he played with the team, he knew it wasn't going to work. But then I also think about his press conferences and his post-game press conferences with the Nets in the beginning, where we won some games, we did some things, but he like literally said, we need to practice. Like, yeah, we haven't had that much practice time. I literally heard him say, like, the first 3 times, like, we might have lost or whatever. He's like, yeah, you know, it's just a matter of not being able to practice. James Harden is a good enough basketball player. There's 5 guys on the court. He knows that if he's one of them and he gets enough time to practice with guys, he can make them better, and he has. We've already said the impact he had on Reggie Perry, the impact he's had on DeAndre Jordan, Nick Claxton, Bruce Brown, even Kyrie. You're the point guard. I'm the shooting guard. Thank God we got Harden. Look at my shirt. That's exactly what it says. Okay, last voicemail. This one is 3 minutes. I can't play all 3 minutes, but you'll get the gist of it from the first minute.
Hi, love your podcast. Definitely enjoy it and appreciate what y'all do for the co-fans. Something kind of bothered me over the last week or so. During the stretch, I've been, this win streak, I've been seeing something that has really been bothering me amongst Nets fans, some things in the media, and it's people expressing that Katie isn't needed, or Katie hasn't been impactful, or Katie, isn't basically doing what everybody expected. And it's bothering me because I feel like people are diminishing who Katie is as a player. Have we forgotten how Katie impacted the team earlier in the season? Have we forgotten that he's our best defender? Have we forgotten that he's the top, to me, he's top 2 player in the world, but,
Hey, I had to cut it, but I will say this. Thank you for calling. That's our first female caller. It's Women's History Month. I appreciate that. Awesome. And what she said was 100% correct. Have y'all forgotten that Katie is one of the best basketball players you've ever seen, period? Have you forgotten the impact that a 7-foot defender has on this defense? Have you forgotten what kind of shot this guy has? And he has every shot. Like, he can create every shot. He can make every shot. And his basketball IQ with Harden's IQ, come on, man.
He was literally the number 1 MVP favorite before the NBA had to take him out because of all the COVID nonsense that we had to deal with a while back. Like, he was the number 1 favorite for the MVP. Like, yes, I think the Nets would be better if they had the MVP favorite back on their team. It's Kevin Durant. It's the Slim Reaper. It's the man who can do literally everything on the basketball court as a 7-footer. He can handle, he can shoot, he can play defense. It's Kevin Durant. And as good as the team's playing now, and as awesome as that is, it's going to be taken to a whole nother level, a whole nother echelon when Kevin Durant steps back on the court.
Yeah, nothing else to say about that. If you want to be on Talking Nets, if you want your question answered, if you want your voice to be heard, call the voicemail 201-870-0461. I play every voicemail. I would say probably 90% of the voicemails. Also, follow us. We are growing. We've now passed 6,000 followers on Twitter. We appreciate everyone, even our overseas people who I keep shouting out because I'm getting DMs from people from India, from Newcastle, from, I think, Scotland. Where else did I talk to someone from? I don't know, but people are coming from all over, and we appreciate that. We want to be your Nets fans. We want to be your Nets brand. We want to be the ones you go to for information, for conversation. So follow us at Talking Nets on Twitter and Instagram. You can follow me at Keith McPherson. Hudson Flynn, where can they follow you?
They can follow me at Hudson Flynn.
And subscribe to the YouTube. We're approaching 200 YouTube subscribers. Our YouTube got started late, but it's now starting to pick up. I think our episode with Eddie was our most watched single episode on YouTube, and that's got around 200 reviews. So go to YouTube, search Talking Nets. We'll pop up. Subscribe to this podcast. And you know how this podcast is growing organically? Tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend. And not just NBA fans or not just Nets fans, NBA fans, because there's going to come a point in time in this season when teams are eliminated and people are going to want a podcast and content to follow during the playoffs. And we plan to be there through every round of the playoffs and the finals. So tell your friends that are into any of these players about Talking Nets. And lastly, we have a review. Hudson Flynn, can you read us that review? I haven't looked at it yet, so I'm hoping I'm delighted by whatever it says.
All right, well, we have an interview from The Truth 530. Maybe he's a fan of a certain trade that the Nets made a little while back. But he says, dope podcast, 5 stars. Been a Nets fan since DC and Kenny Anderson. Always having a good time here. Brooklyn, we go hard. Thank you.
You love to see it. You love to see it. And that's all we've got, Nets fans. It is the All-Star break. I'm working on some kind of podcast for the All-Star, but I don't like
in the works. We got something in the works.
I don't like to say anything too soon. We have something in the works. All-Star game is Sunday. We don't play again until Thursday, March 11th, but we're planning and preparing for the second half of the season. We're working on our next live event. We're working on just bringing you the best content. Myself, Hudson, and Twitchy are going to keep cranking out stuff. And yeah, there's a lot to look forward to. This is going to be the second half push for you to be celebrating your NBA team as champions this summer. So that's all we've got. I don't know if we're going to games, man. We work the games. We clip up the games. We edit videos during the game. And at the price point that the games are at, I think it's a better investment for us to keep building our Nets brand and entertaining our fellow Nets fans than to go to the game. So we'll let you know when we get tickets. But when that time comes, maybe it'll be playoffs. And I'm dreaming of the day when we can all say, let's go Nets, Brooklyn.
We go hard, oh, hard, oh.